Today's a lovely session because we're going to be really working a lot with love, the sacredness of love, the healing power of love, the way in which love isn't just a feeling or a principle, but love is actually the presence of God. Love is that charged space of the divine. So in that regard, love is, of course, a feeling of upliftment. It's a feeling of kind of merging with another or being attracted to something else. But it's also our connection to something higher. It's our connection to our greatest potential. Where there is love, there is God. Where there is God, there is love. This just really came to me the other night as I was falling asleep. I went into this very beautiful zone, and it was just very clear, you know, how love is this charged energy. It's not just a feeling of, oh, I love my partner, or oh, I love doing this. It's a charged energy of possibility. It's a charged energy where magic can take place. Again, it softens the boundaries in the brain, or it softens the limitations in our world. It softens let's say the barriers that keep us in our body or keep us in our ego, allowing space for expansion. And that's a very magical space. That's a very magical energy. And when we feel this love, when we feel this, you know, this feeling and these butterflies in our stomach and this feeling of joy, that is a call to expansion. So whenever we're doing our spiritual practice, it's really important that we have that love in there. You know, our spiritual practice shouldn't just be about duty. You know, sometimes we need the discipline and say, even though I'm tired and I don't feel like it, I'm still going to sit down and I'm going to, you know, do my meditation, or I'm going to lie down and do my breath work. You know, we do need discipline, but it's also not about saying, you know, every morning at 8:30, regardless, I'm going to get up, I'm going to do my meditation for an hour. And even if I don't particularly enjoy it, at least I've done it. You know, we need to have that balance between the discipline and the love, which is the presence of the divine. And I think another facet to that, it's a slightly different facet, but another facet to that principle is where there is belief, there is also God. You know, when we put our belief into something, we bring God or godliness or magic into it. So if we've grown up within a religion and we put that magical energy of belief, whatever that is, it's kind of also related to love in some ways. When we really believe something, our lives will follow accordingly. If we have an amulet or a talisman or a crystal, you know, that we kind of believe in, and we believe that this crystal is going to protect me, or this crystal is going to draw love into my life, or whatever. If you really believe that, it's the energy of belief that creates it, not the actual object or talisman. You know, it's not the crystal that brings the love. It's your belief in the crystal that helps bring in the love, for example. So that belief is also really important. And I think this is something that's very hard in the modern world. It's like, you know, what do I believe? I think most of us have grown up, you know, either Christian, Jewish, or Muslim, you know, in those sort of big religions, big monotheistic religions. And I think many of us look at those and say, I don't really, you know, some of those things I like, but some of those things really don't make sense. And it's really hard to have been brought up within a system and to doubt it, and then to say, okay, well, now where do I place my belief? And I think, you know, a lot of people, as they sort of explore New Age, the New Age thing and so forth, they put their belief in archangels or guides or whatever, and there's absolutely nothing wrong with that. You know, that's perfect. But that does then become a journey of introspection, of what do I believe, where do I put my belief, and not what do I believe because of fear. Am I doing certain mantras or rituals because I'm doing it out of fear, fear that I'm unsafe and therefore I need to do a mantra for protection. As one example, we shouldn't be doing these practices from a place of fear. We should be doing it from a place of love, and of course a place of belief. Again, obviously if you're doing a mantra and you repeat a mantra every day, you're strengthening it, you're charging it with energy, you're building a relationship with that mantra, for example. Or it could be an altar, a statue, a picture, a plant, a tree that you build a relationship with. But we're building a relationship with this symbol, basically, that represents a belief. And when we infuse that belief with love, we make it, of course, that much more powerful. And we feel a natural attraction to it. We're drawn to it. We want to do it. We want to participate in that energy. So the reason why we're going to be practicing ritual is to put belief and love and beauty into our physical space. That is, of course, creating a ritual, and a ritual is also just a way of physically playing out a belief. We light a candle because we believe it's going to have an effect, and we can of course attach a belief to lighting the candle. Whenever I light this candle, I'm also calling in love, and the more we practice that, the more it becomes a new conscious habit, the more power those rituals will have. And of course the same goes for breath work. The more we practice breath work, the more we develop those pathways, that pathway straight into our essence. It becomes easier, it becomes more powerful, perhaps not more powerful every time, but on the whole, in the bigger picture, it becomes more powerful. So by doing these little rituals, we're bringing in belief. When we bring beauty in, beauty is the invocation of love as well. It's the invocation of the divine. And I think in the modern world, especially through art, there's been this movement of all beauty is relative, and ugliness can be beauty as well. Going as so far as artists defecating in a can and calling that art, which is really the very opposite of beauty. So beauty has been made so relative in the modern world, and often we're told that something that's very ugly or disturbing is something beautiful. Yes, I totally agree. Beauty is in the eye of the beholder. One person will find something beautiful that another doesn't. But there is such a thing as beauty in contrast to ugliness. And there is such a thing as beauty in contrast to something which is actually offensive to the senses and to one's being. So, when I say beauty, when we need to bring in beauty, it's really about bringing in something that we find beautiful. But, there are certain things that are beautiful. Flowers are beautiful. You might like one type of flower, another person likes another type of flower, but it's still a principle of beauty and I guess the grace of nature, in the case of flowers, that we're bringing into this, or a work of art that we're bringing into it, not something hideous that's placed in a can and that's called art. So beauty is part of godliness, and when we create a ritual, when we create a special space in which to do our breath work with incense, with a candle, dressing nicely for it, we're again invoking that magical energy of going beyond the day-to-day, going beyond the mundane, and charging that energy with something special and something fresh and something as powerful as God. So, just a few of the ways in which love expresses itself is, first of all, love is the power of attraction. So, one of the models that I love to discuss or talk about is the model of the sun in our solar system, the sun being, let's say, the center of our love. The sun in this reality is the source of all of our light. We might have inner light, godly light, yes, that's one thing, but the sun is a source of all the external light. But the sun is also the center of our solar system, and that sun holds an attractive magnetic gravitational force that keeps us orbiting that sun. And you can call that gravity, but you can also call that love. So we are held within the orbit of the sun by love, not just because the earth happens to be kind of caught in it. If you look at it from a scientific perspective, you can say, yeah, it's just gravity. But it's actually the energy of love that holds us. And just as the sun attracts and holds the planets in its orbit, when we love someone or something, we hold them in our orbit, energetically, but also in terms of how we cultivate those relationships. And when we do, deep work on ourselves, where we build the light within ourselves, therefore becoming little suns, when we build that light within ourselves, we also attract more. We attract more energy into our orbit. We become magnetic because we're loving more, and we're able to hold more. We're able to hold more energy, hold space for others, for ourselves, of course. We're not going to flip out and lose it and freak other people out. We're able to hold a better space in terms of love, just as one example. When we hold more love in our lives, we have the ability to give to ourselves, and therefore we can attract abundance into our lives. We can attract opportunities into our lives because we're holding a love which is saying, come to me. I'm loving, I'm expanding, I'm attractive because of this energy that I hold, and I'm kind of borrowing or channeling the energy of love in my life to be able to make this expansion possible. So when we draw this light in, this love in, we become more attractive, we become more full. We break down the old boundaries of how we used to attract things, and we create new ways of attracting. So love is also a merging energy. It's a union. It creates union. And I think anything that creates, disunity is denial of love, denial of the unity of things. And of course, the union, the most obvious union of love is, sexual union or loving interaction between partners. But it's about emerging with a principle. When we love a book that we're reading, it's resonating, it's awakening something within us, and then we want to merge with that. We want more of it. We want to increase our interaction, our relationship with that. So we're merging with something bigger than ourselves in order to become bigger, in order to expand, in order to become better versions of ourselves. And of course, with each one of us as individuals, we have different things that we love. We have different things that we're attracted to. And that is part, I think, of our journey. I think, the love of God, Goddess, gives us passions, gives us things to love so that we can follow them, and so that we can do those things with joy and with love and with passion, not as slog and as duty and as a heavy thing that we have to face every day. When we do something that we love, we look forward to it, we've got enthusiasm, we've got energy, we're ready to go. And so I think in that sense, we are gifted with love or taste for certain things. We have desires and tastes for certain things. And that is part of God's gift of love to us, is to give us these tastes so that we can pursue them with love and enthusiasm, so that we can grow in those areas. And so that as we grow in those areas, we create them in our outside world. And when we create those things in our outside world, it's obviously an expression of our inner world. And then those things that we give birth to in the outside world become a support system as well. And the obvious example is children, procreation in this case, any form of creation, any form of this idea or vision inspires me. I'm going to learn about it as step number one. Step number two, I'm going to find ways to give birth to that in the world. And that giving birth might be difficult. It might take a few months or years in order for that vision that we've had up here to start looking like something in the world out there. But then we go into the phase of flourishing and abundance, where that vision that we've given birth to, or those children that we've given birth to, are flourishing in their own right. And when they're flourishing in their own right, they give their love back to us. We've generated them, fed them with our love. They become strong in themselves, and then that strength feeds us again. And one metaphorical example of that, of course, is trees in the forests. Maybe the mother tree, other trees spout from the roots, or other trees spout from seeds, or maybe a branch that dips down that once it touches the earth, it creates roots and becomes a tree in its own right. And then as those different trees become a forest, they protect each other, they nourish each other. It's starting, scientists are starting to see in the mycelium, which is the fungal sort of highways of information and connection between the roots of plants, and all plants in the forest, but especially trees. It's the mycelium, that network, that fungal network, shares information, but it also shares nourishment and feeding. So so when there's a forest, they actually don't work as an individual tree, all sort of fighting for space within the forest. They all kind of are fed by each other, by their consciousness, by the mycelium, by the shared roots, by the shared space. So that is an example of how love creates flourishing and abundance and expansion. Whereas cutting ourselves off, hiding ourselves, feeling that we're not worthy, feeling that we're not strong, creates separation, and that creates weakness. When we are in community, we are strong. And of course, that is the communities, I would say, that we choose. It could be communities that we're born into, but often we're born into communities that don't resonate with our soul journey. And our soul journey is about finding the people, the communities, the families that do resonate with our way and our soul journey. And that's a challenging path for many people, especially in their teens, 20s and 30s, is of finding one's place in the world, finding one's community. But in this sense, then, the love is about the merging, the expanding beyond ego, expanding to share with another, or expanding into a greater ideal or principle or vision. Another aspect of love, of course, is that merging is kind of it's an outward expansion. Reconnection is an inward expansion, going deeper into ourselves, reconnecting with our truest self, and also reconnecting with the divine. And that reconnecting with our truest self, I think, is a very important part of our spiritual journey, whereby through our conditioning and experiences, we forget who we have been, and we forget to do the things that we have loved, maybe as children, or maybe when we were younger. And the responsibilities and distractions of life take us out of those. So that is a reconnection. Love is about a reconnection into ourselves, where we say, my essence is worthy of exploring. Despite my duties and obligations, the time and energy spent in reconnecting to my true self is so precious that I need to make the effort, make the time, put the energy in to cultivate that inner garden as well. So it's reconnection with self, but also reconnection with the divine, and being on a spiritual path, as opposed to being, let's say, an atheist. Being on a spiritual path, we do believe that there is some sort of benevolent presence, be that the soul or the higher self, be that a god or a goddess, or be that the greater god, goddess, that is watching us, that has a personal relationship with us, that knows us, that sees us, that hears us, that God of love, goddess of love, that is so important for us to, I think, connect with. And I think a world without that, a world where we are just another, microscopic human being within the vast universe, so small that we're not worth seeing. I think that's a very disheartening way to live. And I think there are levels of God, there are levels of divinity, and maybe the vast divinity that is the full consciousness of the universe doesn't fully know us, that they have an inkling of us. But God is stepped down to different levels. And, when we experience the divine in nature, that is a way in which the divine sees us, especially when we interact consciously with nature. When we work with certain archetypes, work with mantras, songs, practices, offerings, we also create a relationship with those divinities. So, I don't think the world is about, are you monotheistic or are you polytheistic? I think it's all a matter of scale. Everything is within the one greater God, but then there's steps down and there are different ways of experiencing the multifacetedness of the divine. So building that relationship is really important for us, because it gives us orientation, it gives us protection, it gives us a place, and above all, it feeds us, it nourishes the soul, it gives us a path and a place in the world to develop. So the other aspect, of course, of love is that it opens us to fertility, reproduction, creativity. And of course, that needn't be only in terms of having children. It's also very much about our projects and the things that we create in the world, as I discussed a bit earlier. Now, other aspects of love, other expressions of love are gratitude and appreciation. Whatever you're grateful for, and the word grateful comes from the word grace, gratia in Latin. Whatever we're grateful for brings grace, the grace of God, into our lives. Whatever we appreciate will appreciate in our worlds. Appreciation in the sense of growing, the value increasing. So when we appreciate something, we're putting loving energy into it. And when we put loving energy into something, we're cultivating that energy. And as in the case of gardening, when we put a plant in the soil and we appreciate it, water it, cultivate it, fertilize it, it will grow. And I think it's the same. That's one of the basic principles of manifestation. Whatever we give our attention to will grow. So if it's negative thoughts and fears, they will grow. If it's love, that will grow. So our gratitude, or the principle of gratitude, is when we claim ownership of something. We say, I am grateful for your existence in my life. I am grateful that you are. And because you are, I appreciate you. And when I appreciate you, I trust that you will appreciate in my life. As opposed to, non-gratitude is when you say, well, I've got this money, but it's not enough. Or I've got this partner, but they're not perfect. What we're doing there is we're putting our attention on what isn't there, on what's lacking. So, non-gratitude is really focusing on what's lacking. And when that happens, we, of course, make those areas grow. So, an attitude of gratitude is the most important attitude that we can cultivate in our lives. Because when we do so, we claim ownership and we say, okay, maybe this thing is still small, but I'm grateful for what it is now, trusting that it's going to grow and become bigger and appreciate. So gratitude is a different expression of love. Another one is acceptance. Acceptance of who we are, just as we are, We're not comparing ourselves to someone else. I think comparison, obviously, if done in a healthy and balanced way, comparison is good, because we can say, this is where I want to be. Am I there yet? No. What do I need to do to get there? But comparison can also become a supreme self-sabotaging tool, because we can create such unrealistic expectations, or we can compare ourselves to completely idealized models, and obviously we're going to fall short. And then we're going to, again, be in the lack, whereby we say, well, I'm just not good enough, or they are just so much better than me, and where we just stay in a constant state of not being good enough. And of course, not being good enough is a state of non-self-love. It's a state of self-deprivation, a state of self-degradation in many ways. So one of the first steps is just to really accept ourselves. Okay, these are the warts, these are the flaws. There are things I can do to improve them, yes, but maybe there's certain things I'm stuck with in my life, and I just accept and rather focus on the strong points and the good aspects. We're never going to be perfect, we're never going to be 100% perfect. We're never going to arrive. There's always going to be some sort of niggle or something that someone else does better. So that energy of acceptance is saying, I am enough, I accept what I am, and I work with what I've got, and I love what I've got. And that loving what you have, of course, is gratitude. So it's just accepting and saying, this is where I am, and I'm happy with that, and I'm grateful for that. Then, tied in with that is tolerance of what is. Tolerance, sometimes we need to go through certain things. Sometimes we need to tolerate certain things, and it's not necessarily easy. And that, again, that ties in very much with acceptance. But tolerance, of course, should be with a loving attitude, not tolerance, with frustration and anticipation of something ending. It's just tolerating what's happening and what is, so that we come to a place of self-acceptance. Tied in with that is equanimity, which is sort of saying, staying in a balanced place, not judging. Judging is, again, judging ourselves, judging others, ties in with those, let's say, unrealistic models of what's possible, what's perfect. How do I want to be in order to be perfect? Judging is also, judgment is also getting into the ego mind of this is good, this is bad, this is better, this is worse. And it's a head judgment. It's a false duality that's created. And I think the biggest pitfall of judgment and judgmentality is the principle of rightness and wrongness. Especially self-righteousness is a big problem. I think all people, especially when maybe they're less conscious, want to be right or want to prove that they're right. There's a lot of emotional energy goes into being right, showing others that I was right all along, showing others that they're wrong and they should follow my path because I'm right. And that self-righteousness, I think, is very harmful. That doesn't mean you can't have discerning. That doesn't mean that you can have your path, but you don't need to convert other people to your path, or you don't need to be right as a moral superiority over other people. It's just a case of knowing your path, knowing your star, and following that star with love, being pulled by the love. When we're self-righteous, it's like we need others to acknowledge us in order for us to feel that we are lovable. We've been proven right, and therefore we are lovable. So self-righteousness is also a very false. It's one of those energies that keep us out of love. It keeps us in falseness. Then we've got loving ourselves enough to say yes in the right situations, and loving ourselves enough to say no in other situations. And loving ourselves enough to say yes relates to a soul urge, a soul calling, a higher principle calling us, taking a risk in order for us to become a better version of ourselves, going beyond, let's say, the comfort zone of what is, and saying yes to something new because we know we love it within ourselves. And of course, the kind of opposite of that is loving ourselves enough to say no, which is about setting the boundaries and saying, this is what I accept into my space and no more. Or this is how much I accept in no more. And having the discernment, number one, and next having the strength and the power and the self-confidence to say, no, I do not accept this. And of course, going back to the principle of tolerance and acceptance, that doesn't mean that you tolerate and accept everything. We need to have our boundaries. We need to have our discernment. We can't be everything to everyone. We can't live by and accept every principle in the world out there as an expression of our tolerance. We need to say, this is what I love. This is what inspires my soul. And these are the boundaries I build in order to make that garden, in the wilderness. Or, if you live in a desert, you put up your loving fence and you cultivate what you can within that space. You can't turn the whole desert into a garden unless you've got, all the resources in the world. So there's nothing wrong with having that discerning, with having that boundary. That doesn't mean, one needs to judge and be self-righteous, but it's just saying, this is what I love, and this is what I'm willing to do to protect what I love in my life. And that often takes a lot of courage, to be able to make that happen. And then the last principle, I'm sure there are many more, but the last principle that I've come up with is forgiveness. That's a little bit, that ties in a little bit with a previous point of loving ourselves enough to say no. When we forgive, we can say, okay, I don't need to carry this energy in my life anymore. So I say no to that, and the way to say no to that is to forgive it, so that it doesn't eat at my core anymore. I can release it and let it go, so that it's out of my system. And so that I no longer have those things, those ties to me anymore, those emotional, energetic ties anymore. I forgive so that I can enter equanimity in my life, so that I can have more space for the things that I truly love, as opposed to holding on to rancor and reproach. So forgiveness is one of the first steps in our path of loving more, because the forgiveness creates the space. But we have to forgive with love. We can't forgive out of duty, or we can't forgive because it's a known spiritual principle that forgiveness is good. We have to forgive with love, because remember, love breaks down the boundaries. Love attracts the goodness, the benevolence. So yes, forgiveness is an act of giving away, but it has to be replaced by love. And when we call in and invoke the love, it makes that act of forgiveness so much easier. But of course, it's very difficult to forgive someone or something that you hate or that has been hurtful to you. But in a way, we don't have a choice. That relates to self-forgiveness as well. First and foremost, we might have done things that we hate, but we have to love ourselves enough to be able to forgive ourselves, so that we can move forward in our lives in love. So that forgiveness is always a contract, I believe, with love, for love, because forgiveness is about making space for love.